My pregnant wife was standing outside our house in the rain, holding her belly, trying not to panic. She was scared. She just wanted to go inside. Then the HOA police showed up. They locked the gate, blocked the door, and said she was not allowed inside because of a so-called HOA violation. They laughed and told her to wait it out. My wife begged them to stop. She said she was pregnant. She said she needed to sit down. They didn't care. They stood there watching her shake in the rain, acting like they were powerful. But they had no idea that the woman they locked outside is married to the new community director. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. My pregnant wife was standing outside our house in the rain, not pacing, not yelling, standing, one hand pressed gently against her belly, the other wrapped around the cold metal of the gate, fingers numb from the chill. The rain came down steadily, thin at first, then heavier, soaking her hair, darkening her clothes, dripping off her sleeves and onto the concrete at her feet. The driveway glistened under the streetlight, a mirror of gray and silver that felt endless. She was shaking, not from drama, from cold, from fear. She took slow breaths the way her doctor taught her to do when anxiety crept in through the nose, out through the mouth, calm the body, protect the baby. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't breaking anything. She wasn't demanding special treatment. She just wanted to go inside. The front door was right there, the warmth, the couch, a place to sit down and breathe. Then the HOA police showed up. They rolled in slowly, tires crunching over wet gravel, headlights cutting across the yard like searchlights. They didn't hurry. They didn't look concerned. They looked entertained. One of them stepped out and jingled keys loudly, making sure she heard. The other followed, hood up, collar turned high, dry under his jacket while rain slid down my wife's face. They didn't ask if she was okay. They didn't ask why she was outside. They walked straight to the gate. Click. The lock snapped shut. The sound was small, but final. My wife flinched. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice already tight. "That's my house." The second man moved to the front door and planted himself there, arms crossed, blocking the entrance like he was guarding something valuable. "You're not allowed inside," he said flatly. She blinked, rainwater mixing with tears she refused to let fall. I live here," she said. "Oh, a violation," the first one replied, smirking. "Open issue." Rain soaked her hair now, strands sticking to her cheeks and neck. Her dress clung to her legs. The cold seeped in fast, straight to the bones. She shifted her weight, wincing slightly, instinctively protecting her belly with both hands now. "Please," she said, "I'm pregnant." She paused, steadying herself. "I need to sit down." They looked at each other and laughed, not loud laughter, not wild, controlled, amused. "Wait it out," one of them said, glancing up at the sky like the rain was a joke he was enjoying. She stared at them, stunned. The rain dripped from her eyelashes. Her shoes were soaked through. Her back ached. A dull pressure settled low in her stomach, the kind that makes you pay attention. "I'm not feeling well," she said quietly. "Please, just for a minute." They didn't move. They stood there watching her shake in the rain, dry under the awning, acting like the space between them and her was a line she wasn't allowed to cross, like they were powerful. A window across the street cracked open. Someone watched. Another neighbor stepped onto their porch, phone in hand. The HOA men noticed and smiled wider. My wife leaned against the fence for support. The cold metal seeped through her palm. She closed her eyes for a second, fighting panic, counting her breaths. She wasn't asking for favors. She was asking for humanity. "I can't stay out here," she said again, her voice barely above the rain. "Please unlock the gate." One of them checked his. "Watch, rules are rules," he said. She slid down slowly onto the step, careful not to jar herself. Her knees trembled, her hands wrapped tighter around her belly. The rain soaked through everything now. Her voice went quiet. "Can I at least sit inside?" she asked. "Just until this passes?" They shook their heads. "No entry," the other said. "Violation unresolved." A neighbor finally shouted, "This is wrong." The HOA men didn't even look over. They believed the badge made them right. My wife reached into her pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out her phone. The screen was slick with rain, her thumb slipping as she unlocked it. She made a call, not loud, not dramatic. "Hey," she said softly when the line connected. "They won't let me inside." A pause. "I'm outside," she added. In the rain, the HOA men laughed again. "Calling your husband?" one mocked. Tell him to read the rules." She didn't respond. She listened, nodded once. "I'm okay," she said quietly. I need help." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket, both hands returning to her belly as another wave of cold ran through her. The rain kept falling. The gate stayed locked. The door stayed blocked. They still had no idea that the woman they locked outside in the rain, the woman shivering on her own doorstep, the woman begging them to show a little mercy, is married to the new community director, and that the next few minutes would change everything they thought they controlled. The rain got heavier. It stopped being a steady drizzle and turned into something colder, sharper, each drop striking with intent, soaking through fabric and skin until there was no dry place left. The sound filled the street, a constant hiss against concrete and metal, against leaves and rooftops. My wife leaned against the fence. She did it slowly, carefully, as if her body had become something fragile she had to move in pieces. One shoulder pressed into the cold bars. Her shoes slipped slightly on the wet concrete, and she caught herself just in time, heart jumping into her throat. She focused on breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the nurse had taught her, the way she practiced when fear tried to take over. "Please," she said. Again. Her voice was softer now, thinner. "I'm not feeling well." One of the men checked his watch, not because time mattered, because the gesture did. He lifted his wrist slowly, exaggerated the movement so she would see it, so she would understand that he had time, and she did not. "Not our problem," he replied. "Rules are rules." The words were casual, too casual, the kind of tone people use when they already decided you don't matter. They stood under a small awning near the front door, dry, comfortable. Rainwater rolled off the edge of the awning in a steady stream, splashing inches from where my wife stood, shivering. They adjusted their jackets, shifted their weight. One of them leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms like this was a break in his day. They watched her shake, not with concern, with curiosity, like she was a test, like they wanted to see how long she would last. My wife hugged her arms around her belly, instinctive, protective. Her fingers trembled. Her teeth chattered softly, a sound she tried to suppress because she didn't want to look weak. Weakness invites cruelty. She had learned that. "I just need to sit," she said quietly. "I'll be out of your way." One of them smirked. "Sit where?" he asked, glancing pointedly at the locked gate. "Can't let you inside." Rain ran down her face, streaking mascara she hadn't thought twice about that morning. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, then stopped, realizing how small the movement looked to them. She straightened, forcing her shoulders back. The pressure in her lower back deepened. A dull ache spread, slow and persistent. She shifted her stance again, careful, always careful, like she was negotiating with her own body. Across the street, a window cracked open, just an inch. A neighbor peered out, face half hidden by curtains. They saw my wife standing there, soaked, shaking. They saw the two men under cover, dry and unmoving. The neighbor hesitated, then closed the window again. Another house down the block, a porch light flicked on. A phone appeared in a hand. The HOA men noticed, they always do, they noticed the attention, and smiled wider. It wasn't joy, it wasn't pride, it was satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing people are watching and believing that still nothing will happen to you. They thought they were untouchable. My wife's knees trembled. She lowered herself onto the bottom step slowly, carefully, bracing herself with one hand while the other stayed pressed against her belly. The step was cold, wet. The water soaked straight through the thin fabric of her dress. She exhaled shakily. "Thank you," she murmured, not to them, but to her own body for holding together. One of the men glanced down at her. "No sitting," he said. "Stand up." She looked up, disbelief flickering across her face. "I can't," she said honestly. "I feel dizzy." The rain drummed louder. Her hair clung to her cheeks and neck. The cold seeped deeper now, wrapping around her ribs, settling into her spine. She shivered again, harder this time, and couldn't stop it. "Rules," the man repeated. He said it like a shield, like a word that erased pain. My wife tried to stand. Her legs wobbled. She grabbed the fence again, heart pounding, vision swimming just a little. She swallowed hard, fighting the wave of panic that rose when her body didn't respond the way she expected. "I'm pregnant." she said again. This time she didn't beg. She stated it. A fact, a reality. The men exchanged a glance, then one shrugged. Should have thought of that, he said. The sentence landed heavy. Across the street, the phone lifted higher. Someone else stepped out onto their porch, rain splashing around their feet. They didn't say anything, just watched, recording. They HOA men and Otised again. They straightened a little, postured, power with a smile. This isn't personal, one of them said, almost kindly. It's policy. Policy. Another word used like armor. My wife closed her eyes for a second, not to escape, to steady herself. Her thoughts drifted to the warmth inside the house, to the couch, to the glass of water she'd left on the counter, to the baby, safe inside her, unaware of rain or cruelty or rules. She opened her eyes. Please unlock the gate, she said. I'll deal with whatever you say tomorrow. The men didn't move. One of them leaned closer to the gate, close enough that she could see the rain, beating on his jacket but not touching him. Wait it out, he said again, as if the rain were temporary, as if her fear were a choice. A neighbor finally spoke. This is wrong, a voice called out. It came from the porch, carried thinly through the rain. The HOA men turned their heads, just enough, then looked back at my wife. They didn't respond. Silence was their answer. The rain soaked through her shoes completely now. Her toes felt numb. Her fingers ached from gripping cold metal. Her breathing grew shallow again despite her efforts to control it. She felt the pressure in her stomach shift. Not pain exactly, but discomfort that made her heart race. She reached for her phone again. Her hands shook, the screen blurred with rain. She wiped it quickly and made the call, heart pounding louder than the rain. Hey, she said softly when the line connected. Her voice cracked this time. They won't let me inside. A pause. I'm outside, she added, in the rain. The men laughed again, not loud, just enough, calling for backup. One mocked, tell him to read the bylaws. She didn't answer them. She listened, nodded. I'm okay, she said quietly, even though she wasn't sure that was true. I just need help. She ended the call and lowered the e-phone, both hands returning to her belly. The rain kept falling. The gate stayed locked. The door stayed blocked. They stood there dry and comfortable, smiling at their own power. They still had no idea that the power they thought they had was about to disappear, that the woman they were watching shake in the rain was not alone, and that rules were about to meet something far stronger than a smile. My wife slid down onto the step, slowly, carefully. She didn't drop, she didn't collapse. She measured the distance with her eyes and lowered herself 1 inch at a time, like the ground might disappear if she trusted it too much. One hand braced against the wet concrete. The other tightened around her belly, instinct taking over where strength was running out. The step was cold. The rain had soaked it completely, turning the surface slick and unforgiving. The chill went straight through the thin fabric of her dress and into her skin. She hissed softly when she sat, more from surprise than pain, then forced herself to breathe again, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She pressed her palm flat against her stomach and held it there, feeling the small, steady movements inside. That was what mattered. That was what she focused on when fear tried to bloom too fast. Can I at least sit inside? She asked. Her voice was quiet now. Not pleading, not dramatic, practical, just for a minute. The rain filled the pause after her words. It pattered against the fence. It ran down the bars of the gate in thin silver lines. It drummed against the awning where the two HOA men stood dry, unmoved. They shook their heads. No entry. One said he didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He just said it like a rule he'd memorized. Violation unresolved. The words felt rehearsed. Smooth, practiced until they meant nothing at all. He didn't look at her belly. He didn't look at he. Our hands trembling against the concrete. He didn't look at the water pooling around her shoes. He looked past her, like she was already a problem that had been solved. The rain soaked through her clothes completely now. It found its way under her collar, down her back, into places that made her shiver even when she tried to stay still. Her shoulders curled inward slightly as the cold wrapped around her ribs. Her hands trembled, not dramatically, not violently, just enough that she noticed, and that scared her. She pulled them back to her belly and held on tighter, fingers interlacing as if she could build a barrier with her own hands. Her breathing went shallow despite her efforts. The ache in her lower back spread, slow and insistent. She swallowed. I'm not trying to cause trouble, she said. Her voice was softer than the rain. "I just need to be inside." The men didn't respond. They stood under cover, watching her the way people watch something they've already decided isn't their responsibility. One of them shifted his weight and leaned against the wall. The other checked his phone, thumb scrolling casually. Time passed, not minutes, not seconds, something heavier, the kind of time that stretches when you're cold and scared, and try not to panic. A neighbor's porch light clicked on. Another door opened farther down the street. A figure stood under an umbrella, then hesitated, unsure whether to step closer or stay back. The rain made everyone cautious, like it was an excuse not to intervene. A voice finally broke through. "This is wrong." It came from across the street, sharp and clear despite the rain. The HOA men glanced over, just briefly. Then they looked back at my wife. They ignored him. They believed the badge made them right. My wife closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, to steady herself. She felt the baby shift slightly, a small reminder that she wasn't alone inside her own body. That thought helped and hurt at the same time. Helped because it grounded her, hurt because it raised the stakes. She opened her eyes again. "Please," she said, just one word. It hung in the air between the rain and the locked gate. One of the men sighed, exaggerated, like she was inconveniencing him. "You can stand," he said, "or you can wait." She looked up at him. Rain ran down her face and dripped from her eyelashes. Her hair clung to her cheeks and neck. She brushed it away with shaking fingers and immediately regretted the movement when a wave of dizziness followed. She stayed seated. "I can't stand right now," she said honestly. "I feel lightheaded." The men didn't move. They didn't unlock the gate. They didn't step aside. They didn't even pretend to consider it. "Violation unresolved," the other repeated, like it explained everything. My wife's heart began to race. She recognized the feeling instantly, the edge of panic creeping in, the kind that makes your hands go numb and your thoughts scatter. She pressed her lips together and focused on breathing again, counting each inhale. 1, 2, 3. The rain intensified, as if the sky had decided to join the argument. Water splashed off the concrete and onto her calves. Her shoes squelched when she shifted her feet, the sound small but humiliating. Across the street, the phone lifted higher. Someone was recording now openly. The HOA men noticed. Their posture changed slightly. Not defensive, performative. They squared their shoulders, lifted their chins. The small smiles returned, subtle but unmistakable. Power with witnesses. My wife noticed too. She straightened her back as much as she could from the step, refusing to curl in on herself. She wanted to look strong. For the baby, if not for them. "I'll deal with whatever you say tomorrow," she said. "I promise." The words, "company," her effort. The men shook their heads again. "Doesn't work that way," one said. "Rules are rules, rules again." A neighbor stepped off the porch and onto the sidewalk, rain soaking through their hoodie immediately. "This is dangerous," they called out. "She's pregnant." The HOA men didn't look at the neighbor. They didn't answer. Silence was easier. Silence kept control. My wife's teeth chattered now, audible despite her attempts to stop it. She pressed her lips together and hugged herself tighter, arms wrapped around her belly like she could keep warmth in by force. She felt the ache in her back sharpen, then fade, then return. She shifted again, careful, moving inch by inch, trying to find a position that didn't hurt. "I don't feel good," she said. Her voice was barely above the rain. The men didn't respond. They stood there dry and still, watching her shake. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time blurred. The street felt unreal, like a set. The house behind the gate looked warm and close and completely unreachable. Light glowed faintly through the windows, mocking in its nearness. She thought about the couch, the blanket folded neatly on the armrest, the glass of water she'd meant to drink before going outside. She felt tears prick at her eyes and force them back. Crying would only make it harder to breathe, harder to stay calm. She took another breath. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She froze. Carefully, she reached for it, fingers stiff and clumsy. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen, shielding it from the rain with her body. A message. "I'm on my way." Relief washed through her so fast it made her dizzy. She closed her eyes and nodded to herself, then slipped the phone back into her pocket and returned both hands to her belly. The HOA men noticed the movement. "Get a text?" one asked lightly. Good. She didn't answer. She focused on breathing again. Oh, staying upright, on keeping fear from spilling over into panic. The rain kept falling. The gate stayed locked. The door stayed blocked. The neighbors kept watching. And the fear, quiet at first, settled in fully, not as hysteria, as clarity, the understanding that something was wrong, deeply wrong, and that she needed help now, not later, not tomorrow, not after a violation was resolved. She held on for herself, for the baby, for the sound of footsteps she hoped would come soon. And somewhere down the street, unseen and unheard by the men who thought they were in control, help was already moving closer. My wife reached into her pocket with shaking fingers. The movement was slow, deliberate, like her body no longer trusted sudden actions. Her hand felt clumsy, numb from the cold, stiff from holding tension too long. The fabric of her pocket was soaked, heavy with rain, and her fingers slipped once before she managed to hook them around her phone. She brought it out carefully. The screen was dark. For half a second, panic flared. What if it was dead? What if the rain had ruined it? Her thumb hovered, heart pounding louder than the rain itself. The screen lit up. She exhaled, not relief, stability. She wiped the screen with the side of her sleeve, smearing water more than clearing it, then tried again, shielding it with her body. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it, each small movement costing effort. She made the call, not loud, not dramatic, no shouting, no anger, just need. Hey, she said softly when the line connected. Her voice sounded thinner than she expected, stretched tight by cold and fear and the effort of staying calm. They won't let me inside. She paused. The rain filled the silence on her end, drumming against metal and concrete, a constant reminder that time was still moving, that the cold was still sinking deeper. I'm outside, she added Ply. Another pause. Then, softer still, almost embarrassed by how vulnerable it sounded, I'm in the rain. She listened. Her shoulders dropped just a little, as if the sound of a familiar voice, even one she wasn't speaking over, had taken some of the weight off her chest. Across the small space of the yard, the HOA men noticed. They always noticed. One of them nudged the other with his elbow, jerking his chin in her direction. They didn't lower their voices. They didn't step away. They wanted her to hear. Calling your husband? One of them mocked, his tone light, amused. Tell him to read the rules. The other laughed. Yeah, he added. Maybe he can explain how violations work. Their laughter cut through the rain, sharp and ugly. My wife didn't respond. She kept listening. Her free hand returned to her belly, fingers splayed protectively, thumb rubbing slow circles the way she did when she was nervous. Her breathing steadied slightly, guided now by the rhythm of the voice on the other end of the line. Yes, she said quietly. I'm okay. That wasn't true, but it was close enough to get her through the moment. I just need help, she added. She ended the call gently, as if slamming the phone shut might make everything worse. She slipped it back into her pocket, tucking it deep, then returned both hands to her belly. The rain soaked her sleeves completely now. Water ran down her arms and dripped from her fingertips. Her legs felt heavy, muscles tight from holding the same careful posture too long. She shifted slightly on the step, wincing as the ache in her back flared again. The HOA men watched. They saw the call end. They saw her put the phone away. They smiled. Good, one of them said. Backup's coming. He said it like a joke, like a challenge. The other man leaned closer to the gate, resting his forearm casually against it. Doesn't matter, he added. T stays locked. He reached out and rattled it lightly, the metal clanking just enough to be heard. Locked. My wife flinched at the sound, then forced herself not to react. She wouldn't give them that. Satisfaction. She focused on the house behind the gate. The windows glowed softly, light spilling out into the rain. The shape of the couch was visible through the front window. The lamp in the corner cast a warm, familiar shadow on the wall. It was all so close and completely unreachable. She swallowed hard. A neighbor across the street stepped closer to the edge of their porch now, rain soaking through their clothes. They held a phone openly, arm extended, recording without hiding it. Another neighbor joined them. Whispers traveled through the rain. This is insane. She's pregnant. How can they do this? The HOA men noticed the attention and straightened, not defensively, proudly. They adjusted their jackets, squared their shoulders, adopted the posture of men who believed they were performing correctly for an audience. "This is policy," one of them said loudly, projecting his voice so it would carry. "We don't make exceptions." My wife closed her eyes for a moment. The baby shifted inside her, a small, reassuring movement that grounded her again. She pressed her palm gently against her belly and breathed through the fear that surged with the thought of something going wrong out here, in the cold, in the rain, with no way inside. Her teeth chattered. She tried to stop it, failed. The man closest to the door noticed. "Cold?" he asked lightly. "Should have stayed inside." The cruelty was casual, effortless. She opened her eyes and looked up at him. "I was trying to go inside," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, it was tired. He shrugged. "Violation," he replied. That word again. It had lost all meaning. Time stretched. The rain soaked deeper. The cold wrapped tie. Tear. Her muscles trembled with the effort of staying upright. She shifted her weight again, carefully, aware of every sensation in her body now, each ache magnified by fear. She focused on small things, the pattern of raindrops hitting the concrete, the steady glow of the porch light across the street, the faint hum of a car somewhere in the distance. Then, headlights. At first they were just a soft glow at the end of the street, barely noticeable through the rain. A car turning onto the block. Ordinary, unimportant. The HOA men didn't notice right away. My wife did, not because she saw clearly, but because something in her body reacted. A tightening in her chest, a flicker of hope she tried not to trust. The headlights grew brighter, closer. The car slowed. The neighbors noticed next. One of them straightened, angling their phone toward the street now instead of the gate. The HOA men finally glanced over their shoulders. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The engine idled. The rain drummed against its roof. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, calm, focused. He didn't hurry. He didn't run. He closed the door behind him carefully, adjusted his jacket against the rain, and looked toward the house, toward the gate, toward my wife sitting on the step, soaked and shaking. The HOA men stiffened, not fear yet, confusion. "Who's that?" one muttered. The man walked forward, purpose in every step. The rain didn't slow him. My wife felt it then. Real relief, sharp and sudden enough to make her gasp softly. Her shoulders sagged, tension draining out in a rush that left her lightheaded. She didn't stand. She couldn't. She just watched. The man stopped a few feet from the gate. "What's going on?" he asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the rain cleanly. The HOA men puffed up instantly. "She's in violation," one said quickly. "She's not allowed inside." The man looked past them, straight at my wife. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "I was cold," she said. "I called you." He nodded once, then he turned back to the men, and everything shifted. They still didn't know, not yet, but the mockery was gone. The smiles had faded. And for the first time since the rain started falling, they were no longer the ones in control. 10 minutes later, a black SUV stopped at the curb. Not fast, not loud. It didn't screech in or demand attention. It simply rolled to a halt as if it belonged there, rain sliding down its windows in clean, steady lines. The engine idled softly, patient, controlled. A man stepped out, calm, focused. He didn't slam the door. He closed it carefully, adjusted his jacket against the rain, and took a moment to look at the house, the gate. The woman sitting on the step with her hands on her belly, my wife soaked, shivering, trying to hold herself together. He didn't run. He walked. Each step measured, deliberate, cutting a straight line through the rain toward the gate. The sound of his shoes on wet concrete was steady, unhurried. It carried authority without a word being spoken. The HOA men noticed him halfway across the yard. Their posture changed instantly. Not fear yet, confusion. One of them straightened his shoulders. The other crossed his arms again, a reflex. Like folding yourself into a roll, you're suddenly unsure you still fit. "Who's that?" one muttered. The man stopped a few feet from the gate. "What's going on?" he asked. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It cut through the rain cleanly, clear enough that neighbors across the street heard it and leaned forward, phones angling to catch every word. The HOA men puffed up. "She's in violation," one said quickly, gesturing toward my wife without looking at her. "She's not allowed inside." The man nodded once. Just once. No argument, no disbelief. He looked past them, eyes settling on my wife. He took in the way she sat carefully on the step, the way her hands protected her belly, the tremor she couldn't fully hide. "Are you okay?" he asked her. My wife lifted her head. Rain ran down her face and dripped from her hair, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I was cold," she said. "They locked the gate." The man nodded again. "I know," he said quietly. He turned back to the HOA men. "I'm the new community director," he said. "And that's my wife." Silence fell hard, not the awkward kind, the heavy kind. The rain kept falling, but it felt distant now, like background noise to something far more important. Across the street, phones lifted higher. No one hid it anymore. No one pretended not to watch. The HOA men froze. The words took a second to land. When they did, the smiles vanished. The first man opened his mouth, closed it. The second laughed nervously. "You're, okay," he said. "We didn't know." The man didn't respond to that. He looked at the gate, locked. He looked at the door, blocked. Then he looked back at them. "Unlock it," he said. The tone was calm, final. One of the men hesitated. "Sir," he started, "there's a process. Unlock." "It," the man repeated. No emphasis, no anger, just certainty. The key ring jingled as the first man fumbled for it. His hands weren't shaking, but they weren't steady either. He stepped forward and unlocked the gate, the click loud in the quiet that had settled over the street. The man opened the gate himself. He didn't rush through it. He held it open and turned to my wife. "Let's get you inside," he said gently. She nodded. He moved to her side and helped her stand, slow and careful, one hand ready to support her without rushing her. She winced as she rose, but she made it upright. Together they walked through the gate, the warmth from eye. Inside, the house spilled out immediately. The contrast was sharp. He guided her inside, helped her sit down on the couch, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. He set a glass of water within reach and knelt briefly in front of her. "You're safe," he said. She nodded, eyes closing for a moment as the heat soaked back into her skin. Outside, the HOA men stood in the rain, dry now but exposed. The man stepped back out onto the porch and closed the door behind him gently. He turned to face them. "Names," he said. They hesitated. Now he added. They gave them. He took out his phone, not dramatically, and typed. He didn't need to look up anything. He didn't need to call anyone yet. The act itself was enough to signal that this was no longer a conversation. "You locked a pregnant resident outside in the rain," he said evenly. "You blocked her access to her own home. You ignored multiple warnings from neighbors. One of the men tried to speak. We were following policy. You were abusing authority," the man corrected calmly, "and documenting it." He looked toward the neighbors. "Thank you for recording," he said. "Please keep those videos." Several people nodded. One person raised their phone slightly, acknowledging the request. The HOA men shifted. "This is being blown out of proportion." One said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "No harm done." The man looked at him. "My wife is pregnant," he said, "and she was left shaking in the rain." The smile died. Harm was done. He stepped down from the porch and stood level with them. "You are relieved of duty," he said, "effective immediately." "What?" one of them blurted. "Your badges," the man continued. "Your keys." They hesitated again. He waited. They handed them over. Plastic badges, key rings, clips and lanyards that had given them a sense of power an hour earlier, now looked small in his hand. "Yo. We'll receive formal notice," he said, "and there will be an investigation." One of the men swallowed hard. "You can't just—" "I can," the man replied calmly, "and I have—" A neighbor spoke up. "Are they going to be arrested?" The man shook his head slightly. "That's not my decision," he said, "but the evidence will be passed on." He turned back to the two men. "You're done here," he said. "Leave." They didn't argue. They didn't laugh. They walked back to their vehicle, rain soaking them now, shoulders hunched, heads down. The car pulled away without a word. The street stayed quiet, no cheers, no applause, just relief. The man stood on the porch for a moment, letting the rain wash over him, then turned and went back inside. He closed the door, locked it. Inside, my wife sat wrapped in a blanket, color slowly returning to her face. She looked up when he came back in. "Thank you," she said softly. He shook his head. "I'm sorry," he replied. "You should never have been treated that way." She reached for his hand. Outside, the rain kept falling, but it didn't matter anymore because the power that smiled while she suffered had been stripped away quietly, completely, and everyone who watched would remember how fast it happened. The gate was unlocked immediately. The sound was small, a single click, but it echoed louder than the rain ever had. My wife was guided inside. Not rushed, not pulled, supported. The warmth of the house wrapped around her the moment she crossed the threshold. Heat soaked into her skin. The familiar smell of home, clean laundry, tea from earlier that day, the quiet comfort of a place that should have never been denied to her. Hit all at once, she sagged slightly. The tension she'd been holding finally released. A blanket was placed around her shoulders, thick, soft. She clutched it with both hands and sank onto the couch, exhaustion settling into her bones now that she no longer had to fight the cold or the fear. Her breathing slowed, her shivering eased. Safe. Outside, the rain kept falling, but it no longer mattered. The HOA police stood in the driveway, exposed now, water soaking through their jackets the same way it had soaked through my wife's clothes earlier. Only now, no one rushed to protect them. Neighbors remained outside. Phones still raised, video still recording. No one cheered, no one shouted. They just watched, because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise, it arrives with consequences. Before the rain stopped, the suspension notice was already issued. Not tomorrow, not pending review, immediate, badges revoked, keys surrendered, authority stripped away in front of witnesses. The men who had smiled while a pregnant woman shook in the rain stood silent as the words were spoken. Their posture collapsed slowly, like something inflated suddenly losing air. No more power, no more performance, an investigation followed, formal, documented, unavoidable. Statements were taken from neighbors, from people who had recorded, from my wife herself once she was warm and steady enough to speak. The videos were saved, backed up, sent to places those men could never reach or control. Every moment mattered, the laughter, the refusal, the locked gate, the blocked door. Nothing was dismissed as misunderstanding. Nothing was softened into policy enforcement. It was called what it was: cruelty, abuse of authority, endangerment. The HOA tried to distance itself quickly. Emails went out the next morning, carefully worded, cold, polished. These individuals no longer represent our values. We are committed to the safety of our community. An internal review is underway. Their names disappeared from rosters, from group chats, from committee lists, from every place that had once given them a voice. They were erased, not dramatically, completely. My wife recovered, not instantly, not magically. The cold lingered in her muscles for days. The fear surfaced at strange moments, when she heard rain against the windows, when she stepped outside at night, when she stood near the gate and remembered how close she had been to something going wrong. She rested. She drank warm tea. She slept under heavy blankets. She listened to the steady rhythm of the baby's heartbeat at her next appointment and cried quietly when the doctor smiled and said everything was okay. She was okay, but changed. There is a difference between surviving something and forgetting it. She didn't forget. The neighbors changed too. People who had once stayed behind curtains now waved openly, stopped to check in, asked if she needed anything, not out of guilt, but out of understanding. They had seen what happens when silence protects the wrong people. They had learned something too. The men who did this lost then a role. They lost the illusion that power protects you forever. They lost the comfort of thinking rules excuse cruelty. They lost the belief that no one important would notice. They lost their authority in a single night. But more than that, they lost the ability to pretend they were good people just doing their job, because jobs don't force you to laugh at suffering. Jobs don't force you to lock a pregnant woman out in the rain. Jobs don't force you to ignore fear. Choices do, and those choices followed them, quietly, relentlessly. The rain eventually stopped, the street dried, the night moved on, but the consequences stayed, because power that smiles while someone suffers is fragile. It collapses the moment real authority arrives. And the lesson they learned too late was simple. Rules do not outrank humanity, badges do not excuse cruelty, and you never know whose family you're hurting until it's far too late.